this seminar. All right, let me check on the poll. Cool. I see 3 people have completed it. Thank you so much. To the other 2, good job. This seminar. Okay. Cool. All right. So I'll go ahead and get started. It looks like we have a good kind of scatter of what everyone is interested in seeing. And we will cover most of the topics. We'll cover all the topics. Okay, cool. So I will leave that up and then let me share my screen so that we can, sorry, I didn't see the mute button. Yep, to Sunny and to everyone, nobody can hear you. I can allow you to talk if you would like to speak at some point, but since this is a webinar and not a normal sort of Zoom meeting, you don't have to worry about being muted at all. All right, let's get started. Okay. So obviously we're talking about the USA Computing Olympiad. You'll hear me refer to it a lot throughout this meeting as USACO. It's an acronym, stands for USA Computing Olympiad. Another term you might hear me say is IOI. It's the International Olympiad of Informatics. So I just wanted to clarify those 2 before we get started so that everybody knows what the acronyms are that I'm using. Also, throughout this meeting, if you do have any questions, you can use 2 different things. You can either use the Q&A feature. You'll see that at the bottom of your screen. That'll open a question. And then some of the questions will be answered throughout the meeting. Some of them I might save until the end if it is something that we can go over. We also primarily will have me speaking at closer to the end, around 6:30. Andrew will be joining. He is one of our USACO instructors. And if we happen to finish before that, we can always stay on because he is really knowledgeable about USACO. Obviously, he teaches all of our students. So if you have any specific questions, or if your student is currently in USACO and you are confused about something, you can still post those questions. Andrew may be able to answer them better than me. And then the other way that you can chat with me is through the chat feature. I have allowed it so that anybody can use the webinar chat. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, or if I ask for any sort of interaction, you can post in the webinar chat. So moving right along, we're going to jump right into the sign-up process because I did see that there were a decent few people who maybe haven't signed up for a USACO account yet, and maybe that could be helpful in just kind of figuring things out. With USACO, it is different from a few of our other competitions in that students are required to create their own account and they participate on their own within that account. So here at Katie Bite, we do not create an account for you. We will not monitor your account. It's up to students to create the account, and then during testing sessions. So the first test window is this weekend. So that's really exciting. For anybody who is already prepared and wants to start taking USACO this year. But generally it starts in December and there are 4 tests, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Each student, when you do create an account, you should be using the same account each year to compete, because as you advance through USACO, your account will keep track of where you are and which test to provide to you. Obviously, we offer a wide range of classes that help students prepare for USACO. So let me quickly go back, and I'm going to stop this share really quick and get out of the actual PowerPoint. And now we're on the USACO website. So I'm going to send this website in the chat. For anybody who is interested or wants to compete in USACO, like I said, you do need to create your own account. When you go to the link that I sent, or even if you go to usaco.com, you can see here on the right side, it's telling me that I'm not logged in, and I need to make a username and a password. So when you hit register for a new account, then you'll be here at this page and you'll choose. I'm guessing that's not available, but as I go through NA, because I'm not in school, but for your students, you will enter what school you're a part of, and then what year you'll graduate. Invalid country code. You know what? There. Okay. So like it said on the register for an account page, even though it threw me back to the login page, as soon as you register, a password is going to be sent to the email that you signed up with. So make sure that you're aware of that, because it can get confusing if you're thrown back to the original page, but it is really that easy to create an account for USACO. So let me stop sharing really quick so I can pull up my email. And then I can grab my password. And then we can see what it looks like inside. Okay. All right, so now that I am logged in, right now there is not a contest running. You see the first contest will be available as of December 15th. But you can see I can edit my account settings if I wanted to change my password. I can view all of the old contests, and you can look at just an overview of what USACO is. I would say that the most beneficial page to anybody who is just now getting into USACO, and one of the reasons that we asked in the first set of questions, if you've ever tried a USACO problem, is all of the historical competitions, which are there. Resources. If you go into each of them, you can see contest results, which is going to just tell you kind of how people did. And then it will give you platinum, gold, silver, and bronze. And you can see the problem, test data, and solutions. So these are a really great place to start if you want to know where your student is at. It's good to kind of view these problems and just see if it's something that they can handle. Just checking to see if there are any questions. Any questions on just very basic how to create an account, and making sure that we stay with the same account. So making sure you save the login and the password for your USACO account. All right. So I wanted to give kind of a general progression for people who are in our courses. And then if you are not a member of our courses, we can always talk with you and have you talk with one of our USACO instructors to see where you fit best, or maybe what sort of things to look out for. But the general progression is from Core 5A to Core 5B. And once you've gotten to Core 5B, you're able to start taking USACO bronze level classes. That doesn't mean that you have to wait until after Core 5B to start looking at USACO, or even to start trying to compete, because USACO is open to any high school student. So you are more than welcome to always make an account and just try, see what happens. You'll learn a little bit more later that even if you fail, or even if you're not doing great, that's still good, because USACO takes a lot of practice to get good at it. Once you see here, the USACO Bronze 1 and 2, we ended up expanding sort of the bronze level and the silver level, because students generally need a little bit more time to both understand the material and then to be able to use it in a way that helps them to advance. But if you were to advance from bronze to silver, then you don't have to take all of these courses. These are mostly here to be an option to support students, whether they need a little extra time with the material or if they're a-okay to get off and running. You can see that we have a few core classes kind of scattered in throughout the USACO classes, and that is intentional. So with USACO, I always look at it as an application of what they're learning. So with bronze, by the time that you're done taking bronze, you might need just a little bit of extra skill, which is what comes with Core 6A. It gives you more time to understand various concepts, obviously, data structures, algorithms, dealing with large problems and finding large solutions, helps you deal with efficiency. So in your code with USACO, it's not only about the fact that there are 3 difficult problems, potentially 4, but there's also a time limit for USACO. So understanding how to do things, do them well, do them effectively, and do them quickly is all something that kind of goes along hand in hand. After Core 6A, you're ready for silver 1 and 2, and then we highly recommend 6B before gold. All of this, I would say, is quite a general progression. Each student is different, and so generally, you will get a recommendation from instructors, and if you have specific questions about your student, it's best to either schedule a meeting with me, an academic advisor, or talk with your teacher to see what would be best for your student. But in general, we've seen the most success with this sort of progression through USACO. Does anyone have any questions about just the Katie Byte progression of courses? Perfect. So some key things to know about USACO is that there are 4 contests a year. Each is during a specific weekend, and you have 4 hours. Usually you might not use all 5 hours, but you have a 4-hour time period throughout the weekend. So you can start it at any time, just make sure that within that 4-hour window, you'll be done before the end time for that weekend. Like I mentioned previously, this is all independent work. You can't work on a team, and you are not intended to be using help externally. This competition does qualify individuals for the International Olympiad in Informatics, but a lot of times that doesn't matter so much. You will have to get to the platinum division and then qualify for the IOI. There's a training camp that also happens. So that's not the most important thing, but it means that its format is similar to some other competition formats. And Holly, you asked a really good question. So Holly's question is it best to take the USACO classes in the fall so that it's finishing up in December and January when contests start? And everyone will be a little bit different. Our general estimation that we like to give parents is that it takes about a year of preparation to be completely prepared for USACO. And a year is kind of like, in our classes, you spend an hour a week with material, and then you have like 30 to 45 minutes of homework. With USACO and with that sort of general structure, it does take quite a bit of time, not only because USACO is the most difficult of the competitions, but also because you have to be practicing and practicing and practicing. So generally, you can take USACO classes at any time. I would say if you're starting to think about USACO, it's important to be kind of at the 5B level, or be comfortable with working with difficult algorithms and thinking of them on your own. So in a lot of our classes, homework is based on classwork, and you're not often given a problem with no start to the solution, but in USACO, you are given a problem and no solution to begin with. You're given test cases. So I would say preparing for USACO, at least think about it 2 semesters or 3 semesters ahead of when you plan on trying to compete. Something else that's good to do is every time that USACO is available, trying it. If a student does poorly and they have no practice, that's okay. It gives a really good idea of what they need practice on, whether it's preparing for the test or the actual material. Maybe they're not super comfortable with different types of arrays or understanding what different pieces to use in a competition. That can be really helpful for people. But I will say it is not the best idea to take the USACO class and just start getting into the material right before or during the contest. So usually I would say it's good to do in December if you're planning on taking the test next year, or if you're okay with taking it this year and potentially not advancing, or start in the spring and then summer and then take the test again in December. I hope that answers the question. So 4 semesters with Katie Bite, usually it is fall. So it's September to the end of January, and then beginning of February until May, roughly. And then the entire summer is a semester. So there's 3 of them roughly per year. They overlap just a bit with the next year. All right. And then the format, USACO themselves say that they can be 3 to 4 programming problems per round. Usually it is about 3. Generally we don't see 4, but it's on the website, so they can put 4 in. Right. So there are 4 divisions within USACO: bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. Everyone begins in bronze, which is a little different if you are familiar with ACSL or familiar with a lot of the other competitions. You get to choose your division, or your division is chosen based on your age. Since USACO is the most difficult competition, everyone starts out at bronze, and bronze is quite difficult. And then once you are doing well, you can be promoted to the next divisions. Divisions can be looked at kind of like sports leagues. Once you are promoted, it just means that you're going to get harder problems the next time, and you can't be demoted. So that's important to recognize as well. Each problem in the contest is weighted. You can earn partial credit or you can earn full credit. Usually around 700 to 850 is the amount that you would need to get promoted. So that's 2.5 problems out of 3. Something else to keep in mind with USACO that is sort of unlike other IOI competitions, like the Australian Olympiad of Informatics, or Informatics Olympiad, AIO. Their problems get progressively more difficult. With USACO, there is no guarantee that the problems are progressively more difficult. So they could all 3 be equally kind of in level of difficultness. And that's why we generally highly recommend looking at all 3 problems. If a student is getting stuck, make sure that you at least take a look at all 3 problems, so that way, if you could have done problem 3 and you never had a chance to look at it, you might have missed out on some points. So we've talked about a little bit how difficult USACO is. This is intended for high school students or advanced younger students. They don't have an age cutoff for the lower level. So anybody can sign up for an account and participate. If you are out of high school, then obviously you can't put in your graduation year. And you wouldn't be able to go to platinum and go to IOI anyway, because they do check. And this is an individual contest, so you are working on yourself advancing, and somebody else advancing doesn't really have an effect on you in your participation. So bronze is a bit more advanced than the AP level. So even just getting from bronze to silver is a noteworthy event, and then promotion to gold is very impressive. Platinum, you're at sort of Olympic level training, and that means that you're in the top 16 in the country. So the difficulty of USACO has kind of fluctuated, but in the last few years, it has been increasing. I know that we've had some communication with their organization leader And I think they are working on making it a little bit more accessible, but it is meant to be a high school level Olympiad style difficulty. So that kind of comes with the territory. When we're looking at the different levels, so bronze, silver, gold, and platinum, you can see generally in bronze, you'll see some common sense algorithms, but you need sort of different tricks, and you have to have very clear and organized logical thinking. Once you get to silver, you have to know a lot more very specific algorithms, which is kind of why we go bronze, and then you take sort of the core 6A, because the amount of algorithms that you need to know and the amount of just fundamental knowledge that you need to know grows. And in the core 6A level, you are introduced to more of those high level difficult algorithms. And obviously at each level, your code efficiency is important, but at silver level, it becomes very important, potentially as difficult as a Microsoft interview question. That's something that Andrew added because he used to work at Microsoft, and he also does all of our USACO training. So I just think that's kind of funny that you're kind of working at the difficulty that some adults are working at. At gold, obviously you're getting more advanced, and this is including custom data structures that you may need to apply, a lot of different ways that maybe a custom data structure or something that is very difficult has to be applied. And then platinum, you either need a lot of tutoring or a lot of practice, and that can be individual practice. In our next slides, we'll go over either getting started, and then we'll talk about some tips for our students and for any student who is getting into USACO and wants to do well. So with IOI contests, it's sort of a structure of a few different contests. So we have USACO, AIO, which I talked about, which is the Australian Informatics Olympiad, and CCC are all considered IOI contests. It means since they're all similar in structure, once you figure out the basics of competing in one, you can do the others with similar skills. Some common issues that some of our students face are the commands that read input data and output results correctly and aren't too complex, but they have to be done exactly correctly. You have to pay attention to details and practice ahead of time in order to not have that take up way too much time and you end up not having enough time to complete the problems. They do require an amount of creativity, which we don't usually hear within STEM. And this style of creativity is taking what you know and being able to apply it in different ways. And you also have to be able to think very large picture instead of thinking in a very small scope. And generally, like I was talking about previously, with our homework and a lot of classwork, it's meant to instruct, and this type of contest is meant to test. So when we're instructing, we want to give information and then give similar information on like homework, tests, quizzes, so that we're testing that information. With this, it's sort of testing all of the different ideas that students are learning and capable of, and then testing how comfortable they are with the different sorts of application of that information. And the biggest thing is don't be afraid to try something, even if you're not sure if it will work. It's best to try different ideas and maybe not do so great, better so than not trying at all. I did want to get into just a brief little bit of USACO problem solving strategy, because this is something students learn in our classes, and I think it's really valuable for parents to be able to hear and maybe pass along to students, because I will send this out to everyone in sort of a PDF form. And if people did want to try, I know that we got a few responses that maybe people haven't already been in a class or haven't started sort of the USACO journey yet. And if we haven't started it yet, that is totally okay. Yeah, we had general, is USACO right? So this is a good place to start because you can create an account at any time. And to start, you want to read and understand your problem. It's nice to have a piece of paper and pencil to write out just the general points of the problem. And you are given sample data, so you can try and solve it for the sample data by hand. You want to brainstorm some approaches or patterns. We're not thinking just for the given sample data because there is data outside of that they're testing your problem against. So try to think more overall, less specifics. Make an outline. So that can mean that you're writing out the problem, any steps you might need to take, and hopefully a solution. And then you can implement your outline. So you're writing out the code at that point. After you're done writing out the code, then you're going to test and debug, and you can test it on the USACO site as well. And they'll use more test data sets. And you might also need to test or think of data sets to test on your own. But this is a good pattern or structure, whatever you would like to call it, for at least beginning to get into USACO and even trying a problem to start out. I know that generally with competitions or USACO, it's hard to kind of figure out where you would even start with a problem like a USACO problem. So for anybody who's in the core 5A or B level, I do recommend potentially just signing up for a USACO account and trying out some of maybe their old problems. Or even if you want to, you could try out some of the old problems and then try to compete with the knowledge that you're doing it to learn and to understand kind of what that feels like, more so than you're doing it to 100% advance to the next level. All right. Any questions on like problem solving strategy? Let me know. I will send this out in just a PDF. So you guys can kind of expect that. I think that could be useful. So that's a really good question. How long should each problem take? You have 4 hours and 3 problems. I think it's 5 hours actually. And the hardest part is that each problem is unique and different. And so if you are really skilled with using like arrays and lists and different things, then it might be that one of those problems plays into your current skill set, which would be really great. I would say, in my opinion, probably like an hour and a half per problem, but obviously your efficiency as you kind of get more comfortable with the material and more comfortable with the structure and more comfortable with creating good detailed outlines, I think that time can go down. And that is something that we can also leave to answer for Andrew as well, because I think he would be probably better at it, but I think that he would probably follow my same line of each problem is going to be independent. And if you do find yourself spending more than maybe 2 hours on a problem, definitely look at the other problems. That's kind of where test taking, prep, and practicing comes in handy. Because if you're finding yourself spend, I would say probably 2 hours on a problem, it's always better to look at all of the problems and at least try each of them, and not spend the entire time on one problem, because you might have a skill set that fits really well for a different style of problem. But I will also, once Andrew's able to hop on, I will also go ahead and ask him what his opinion on kind of at least timing is, because he would know better than I would. All right. So for IOI style contests, and like I mentioned, that does include a few others. CCC is in person, AIO is online as well. So it kind of just be dependent on which tests you prefer. Does time and space complexity matter for each? Sorry. For whoever asked, does time and space complexity matter for each problem? Would you mind putting in the chat just a little clarification? I don't know if you mean like time and space as in the space that they're working in, or like time and space as in literal time and space. So if you want to just throw just a little bit more information in the chat, I'm happy to help answer that. For any IOI style contest or contest just in general, practice doesn't make perfect, but it makes you better. Classes and training can really help with giving you fundamental concepts, teaching algorithms, teaching you how to utilize things in different ways. But individual practice and review is going to be your best friend if you are trying to do well in advance through these competitions. And obviously, like I've said a few times, or I don't think I've said this sentiment exactly, but don't get discouraged. These competitions are difficult, but when going into them, or when your student is going into them, it's always better to prepare them in saying, this is hard, and we don't have to advance this time, especially if you are newer to competitions, and maybe this is kind of just seeing if this is something your student would be interested in. It's always better to start with a low pressure situation. A lot of students will have to get stuck and maybe not do great and go back and do it again, because you're building necessary skills not only to solve the problem, but to work through things when there's a time crunch. You're working through really hard material that maybe doesn't look like normal school tests or even the ACSL. So this is a very different situation for a lot of students, starting with a low pressure environment, making sure that you're comfortable for test taking, making sure that you've set up an environment that is conducive for taking a longer test. Those are all really important things to think about getting into the test, and being a reminder that even participating in the test is more than a good amount of students will do, because there's still people that either don't know about the test, or maybe this isn't the vibe for them. Maybe they don't like it. Oh, hold on. You can also just expect that you're going to have to try again. You have 4 competitions in 1 year, starting in December, going all the way through finals. Finals are just another, okay, I see what you meant. Finals is another competition. You don't have to qualify to take the test for finals, but you have 4 chances each year to advance. And you have multiple years generally in high school. So if your student's already at sort of the core 5 level, this is a good thing to start getting interested in. And we just really want to encourage you not to get discouraged either as a parent or a student when facing USACO. And also know that there's lots of other competitions that can help prepare. So if you are in core 5A or below, even like the core 4 levels, I would recommend getting into potentially ACSL, because that's a good competition that its complexity is made for each level. So each kind of age range of students is catered to in USACO in a way that you don't really see as much in, or in ACSL that you don't see as much in USACO. USACO has 1 difficulty level. Everybody has to start from there. And then from then on, you kind of advance from there. Someone asked, does the time spent on running the code affect the score? No, because you could spend the entire time, as long as your code is correct and runs for all test cases, then you will get the points. If your code does not run for every test case, then you will lose points. The only time that time spent on running the code, actually, I guess time spent working on the code does not affect your score, unless it takes you so long that you can't finish all 3. So that, yes. Time spent on the code running. The code does have to run in a certain amount of time. I think there is a timeout point for the code. That's why sometimes Python is harder to use because it compiles slower. So running the code itself can affect your score. I hope that I answered your question. So 2 answers, I'm not sure which one. Time spent working on the code to get it to run will affect your score if it means you cannot finish all of them. Running the code, it has to compile in a certain amount of time. So that can also affect your score by making it so that answer doesn't count. More advice. When thinking about getting into USACO or any competition, it is beneficial for students to try a few different types of competitions and a few different ways of practicing. Used to be that USACO was one of the major competitions, but even before that, ACSL happened, and usually with USACO, it's been online, so it has had a lot more accessibility. But with ACSL, that one always used to be in person and is now able to be taken online. There's also a couple websites with libraries that are sort of online judge. They're filled with online judge problems. And also enjoy the journey. Obviously, it's not always easy, but it's really satisfying to get to understand things and figure out how to do things. And I wouldn't focus so much on getting promoted, because even during USACO or ACSL, you're learning test taking skills, you're learning how to use code in inventive ways, you are learning to adapt with your code. So there's a lot of positives that come out of it. And if you find yourself feeling like you're getting trapped, or your student feels like they're stuck, there's always an option to kind of take other classes and then come back. But also, it's really exciting when students get promoted or they learn something and kind of a light bulb goes off. So really enjoy those moments and take advantage of them as you're kind of working through getting ready for and competing in USA Computing Olympiad. Are students allowed to read Java documentation or search for code syntaxes during the competition? I am going to wait for Andrew to answer that question. My thought is no. I think that it is a closed book style test, but I could be a little bit off. I'm not sure 100%, so I'm going to wait for Andrew to be able to answer that question. And for like advanced students in any sort of IOI competition, you want to be proactive with our classes. We give you enough practice to get you comfortable with the material. But the reality is, if you want to advance quickly, or if you want to be really good at it, you have to be able to practice a lot. We generally do assign homework in USACO classes. In all of our core classes, they all have homework. But we are an after school program, so we recognize we have to fit into other people's lives and spaces. And so we give enough practice that allows students to get comfortable with material and learn and understand it. But if you want to be quick, and if you want to make sure that you are able to quickly access the information in your mind, it comes from a lot of practice. It's not going to be enough to only work on the work given by other people. You have to kind of engage with different resources, homework, extra USACO problems, and seek different practice that meets whatever needs you have. If you're working on different problems, it's good to look for different ideas that you can apply beyond one example or one thing. So it's also, you can go and look at some different problems and try to solve it in different ways. That helps with creative work and trying new things and being comfortable with using different pieces of code to create something new. Lastly, you want to review the core concepts or just concepts focused on the complexity of the more difficult problems in this style is very high. So make most of the work you've done by reviewing it rather than always seeking new work. Review can be a really great tool for any student to make sure that they're comfortable with material and that they can apply it quickly and effectively. And lastly, we have made a few updates. We now offer 2 full semester classes for bronze 1 and bronze and 2, and then silver 1 and 2. The second level classes are flexible to work through some different trouble spots that we've noticed in our students, and they generally stick to harder problems. So it's important to take the first and then the second because the second level does get progressively more difficult. It's still important to do independent practice, but if you're also trying to kind of fit this style of test taking in with other extracurriculars or activities and you can't focus completely on it, it is beneficial because it's structured work that helps you go over progressively more difficult problems. And lastly, we've been working on a lot more different contests and offering each of the contests. Each of them kind of comes with their own different niches. So we are excited. We were able to do the Australian Informatics Olympiad for the first time ever. We offered that this year, and that went really well. We had a lot of people who were able to participate. The Beaver Computing Challenge went over really well. So we are trying to offer different competitions at different levels. Also keep in mind that if your student is excited about coding and they maybe want to have something to show for it, there are a lot of different ways to do that. USACO is a really great one. Competitions are really great. There's also research project options. There's going into art and design. So remember that if they start taking USACO and don't love it, or it's stressful and maybe not the best option, just remember there's a lot of options out there in CS that offer tangible results for students who want to be able to see what coding is helping them with. So if anybody else has any questions, feel free to ask them. That kind of wraps up all of our material. So I'm going to stop sharing, but I'm going to double check